Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 21047.com podcast. My name is Keith Cartwright. I am the host of this show, and I am really glad to have you along listening in today, wherever it is that you're listening, whenever it is that you might be listening in. I am just glad to have you along listening in and participating today. This episode is sponsored by my dear friend, Ashley Glatter. Ashley is the newest sponsor of this show and the entire 21047 effort, the stories that I try to share there. Ashley is the perfect sponsor for this show. Her and her husband just recently sold their home. They've bought an RV and are traveling the country, doing some races, visiting some different things, sharing the stories, working from the RV. They are just on this big, bold, dare greatly adventure, and she's just the kind of friend I need to keep me moving ahead boldly in my own life, taking some risk, and just believing that good things are going to come from it, and that's exactly what she's done. So I am grateful, one, inspired, two, and just really appreciative that she is part of this effort now. If you're interested in learning more about supporting me through Patreon, you can go to my website, 21047.com, TWOTIM47, all one word.com, and then just click on the Support Me tab, and then that will give you more information about how you can back this show on a monthly financial basis, or you can just continue to listen to these stories, share them, try to bring some light to people through these incredible stories of people that I've been able to meet along the way of this running journey. One of them you're going to hear today, one of the more powerful stories that I've ever been able to share, and just really had a great time in this interview we're going to share with you today. So again, if you want to learn more about supporting this effort, just go to my website, 21047.com, TWOTIM47.com. So a couple weeks ago, I'm at work checking my personal email, and I get an email from GoFundMe, which I thought was spam. I usually ignore these things, but because I know now somebody was kind of guiding my hands that day, I went ahead, I clicked on the email, and I saw just this incredibly moving video of a local woman running 100 miles to try to raise money for some scholarships for some incredibly deserving, but also some needy young people, needy in the terms of they need an opportunity to pursue an education that they probably wouldn't otherwise have the resources to do. And Kate Fletcher was out there fighting to get them that opportunity. And I'm not going to talk much about that because she and I had about an hour and 20-minute conversation, and I'm going to share the whole thing with you, and you'll hear all about her. You will absolutely be drawn in by her heart, her desire, her brute strength just to get out there and be able to run 100 miles. And there's just so much to learn from her. So listen to Kate's heart and Kate's desires, and be moved by it. I'm going to turn you over to my conversation with Kate Fletcher right now. Well, I want to welcome Kate Fletcher to the 21047.com podcast. So welcome, Kate.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Kate is a teacher at Louisa High School. What do you teach up there?
I'm an English teacher. I teach 11th graders English.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk a little bit tonight, like I always do on here, about some pretty incredible running stories. So the first thing I want to ask you is how you got your start running.
I didn't run in any serious way until I was about 35. I ran around a lot as a kid, but I still have very serious asthma. And actually one of my earliest memories is in Vancouver, Canada, where I grew up. I don't know if it was with the school, but I just remember running down the street, and I remember distinctly that we were passing a fire station, and it must have just been a short run, but it was some sort of community event or school event, and I realized, no more than a mile into it, that I could barely breathe. And now I know, looking back, that it was my asthma. And then in high school, I joined the track team and I was on the basketball team, but I was just always puffing on my inhaler. That was just, the basketball coach used to have it on the sidelines, and I'd literally run up, as the game was playing, and have to puff on this inhaler and go back and keep playing. So it was like I had this, maybe some athletic potential, but your lungs are pretty important when it comes to running. So I was never really able to explore that a whole lot. And certainly I wouldn't have thought of running long distances. I can remember a 5K as a teenager and just thinking it was so difficult, just shockingly difficult. How did people do this? And then when I was about 35, there's no really dramatic start to it, but my very good friend mentioned something about how she hadn't been to the gym for a while, and she's not a runner, but that she hadn't been to the gym for a while, and that she didn't feel right when she went so many weeks without getting sweaty. That, like, to not work up a sweat for weeks at a time felt wrong to her. And she described it so vividly to me. It was one day after school in my classroom, and I thought, oh, I don't even really understand what you mean. That must be a problem. Like, the fact that I don't even understand what you're talking about, like, that doesn't resonate with me at all. Yeah. Because it's been so long for me that that's not even a part of, like, the way I look at the world or myself, yeah. Or, And so it was just sort of an inkling. And I'm a single mom, so there was a little bit of, I have one daughter, so a little bit of a juggling factor. But my daughter was 9 at the time. And I went down to the track near my house, which I still run on a ton to this day, and realized that she could play on the playground and I could run on the track. And so that was the start to it. And I, since then, I've really never had more than a few weeks at a time where I haven't been running.
Yeah. So what was the first sort of big, long race? Because we're going to talk in a little bit. You've run some pretty long distances now. Yeah. So I wonder what was the first event or the first long run you took on?
Well, I never raced a 5K back then. I went right to a 10K, which isn't long, but the Monument Avenue 10K, which here in Richmond, as you know, is so many runners first start. That's like everyone who runs in Richmond credits the Monument Avenue 10K as being their first run. So I did a 10K and liked it, although I didn't really like the racing part, and that has stuck with me to this day. I really don't enjoy racing for racing's sake. I mean, it makes me more anxious than anything else. But after doing the 10K a couple of times, so a couple of years, so maybe one race a year, 2 years in a row, I set my sights on the Richmond Marathon and ran it just completely on my own. I didn't run with any groups. Again, I would say 99% of my training was on that track, that elementary school track. So, and I didn't even own a watch. In fact, I only bought my first watch last year. So I didn't own a watch, and I would literally, oh, this sounds so crazy. I sound like someone from medieval times. I would fill my short pockets with little pebbles, and every lap I would throw a pebble out. And that's how I kept. That's how I kept track of how much I'd run. And like when I'd figure.
Now, did you throw them in the same spot then, so you could count them afterwards?
Well, no, I'd count them beforehand. So if I knew, I want to run. So it's an elementary school track, so it's literally 8 laps to a mile. Okay. So my daughter would be on the playground, and I think, I want to try to get 5 miles in, and I'd put 40 little gravel pebbles in my pocket.
Counted them ahead of time.
Yeah,
very cool.
It sounds crazy. Sounds like something from.
There are people listening right
hundreds
now.
Hundreds of years ago.
We're also
instead of buying a Garmin.
Yeah.
And actually, I still rarely wear a watch. I just bought a watch last year because of my first school run. I know we're going to talk about that in a minute. But I've run the Richmond Marathon 6 or 7 times, and that's the only race I ever do now. I just run that once a year, and that's the only race I do. And I've never worn any kind of watch. And this year I ran my fastest time, which was a 3:33. But the 2 years before that, I ran within like 15 seconds of each other my times without even a watch. So it feels like my body just has a strong sense of the pace that it can maintain. And my splits are always good. Well, not always, but those last 3 times running the Richmond Marathon, my splits have been, favorable. Yeah. So I'm not totally off. I just would be so distracted. I would be it would take away my mental strength, I think, to have a watch on.
You know, so many folks who run and are, I guess you're one of the first people I've talked to or interviewed that's not really into the races or
Right.
being a part of that. And then factor in, now you're saying not really into the watch, and you sound different in that it doesn't seem as important to you to keep track of those splits or kind of know what mile I'm on. The numbers.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
I know people, and I've kind of become that way, where you
Right.
keep these logs and just all,
Yeah.
that doesn't seem like it's you.
No, I mean, there's probably lots of reasons for it. Like, as an English teacher, I'm so completely not a math person. So I know that sounds silly, but part of it is just literally, I have sort of an allergy to numbers. That's not something that, I don't think in numbers. I don't think about numbers. They don't bring me pleasure. They bring me confusion and pain. You know, like, they're not like the way I communicate with myself or anybody. And I guess, you know, no offense to math teachers out there, but I don't really have a huge appreciation for the numbers. And then I just know myself well enough, and I think everybody's so different. Like, you have to do whatever motivates you, and it's like we're all so unique in that way. Yeah. But I know if I was racing and I was wearing a watch, if I started looking at it, I would just miss all of those unquantifiable factors that make me do well. So those moments where for no reason that I can discern, for no measurable reason, I feel great and I run faster, you know, and then in those moments where I might slow down and I don't really know why, but because I'm not wearing a watch, I don't even really know that I'm slowing down, and I'm soon over it and I move on and something inspires me, you know, some kid on the side of the road or a bird in a tree or whatever, and I get back to a good place again, and I just know myself, a watch would just interfere with all of that. Yeah.
And from a training standpoint then, because clearly you know when the Richmond Marathon is coming up, and
Right.
you probably at least think ahead.
And I train with MTT.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you do. That was my next question, because I know a lot of people then who follow these calendars, and I know I got to do so many miles. Is that you, or do you have more of an unstructured approach?
I'm very unstructured. I mean, so I run more than I'm supposed to a lot of weeks, and I run probably less than I'm supposed to some weeks. I just figure it all comes down the wash. Like, it all.
But you don't
evens out.
lose a lot of sleep over it.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I, you know, so the group I've run with, MTT, Marathon Training Team, very popular in Richmond. I ran several marathons before I ever ran with them. And I just found that training on my own, the marathon was so much harder for me. And then when I joined that group, I got so much more running in because I couldn't talk myself out of it on a Saturday morning. I knew I'm going to meet this, you know, this is why so many people run with a group. I knew I'm going to meet this big group of people, and they're counting on me to be there. And it's pleasant, and you talk, and you're chatting, and the next thing you know, you're done with your 20-miler. And so I ended up running more than I ever had in training, and enjoying that social time once a week. Most of the time, to be honest, I prefer to run by myself. I'm definitely an introvert and like my alone time. But, you know, once a week it's nice, especially for the long runs. It's definitely nice. And all around me, everyone's got, you know, we're running down the road and I hear beep, 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 beep. It's all, everyone's garment's going off, and my wrist is just empty and blank.
You're tossing your pebbles.
Yeah, that's nice. It's the one time I don't toss my pebbles. Yeah. But
no, I completely get that. Running is, I've been running now 4 years, and it's very much an alone. Yeah. I say, you want to take the fun out of running for me, make me run with somebody.
Right.
And it's two things to that. One is that I just have really come to appreciate that alone time.
Yeah.
I just take a lot more in. For me, it's been a very spiritual journey. So I've said the biggest thing is that I no longer talk to God. I hear God when I'm out there.
Right.
And then the other piece to that is that I don't want anybody to tell me, come on, you can do it, or you speed up, or we can do this. Right. I just want to run my own pace, my own deal. Now, the real irony in that is back in April, I ran my 11th half marathon. It was the first race I ran start to finish with somebody.
Okay.
I had a goal in mind of running my fastest half marathon ever, and it was in Lexington, Kentucky. So it was the hardest course of them.
Hilly.
Very hilly. And I ended up running my fastest one because I had somebody the whole time.
Right.
I felt the pressure.
Right.
I had to keep up.
Right.
It was challenging. So,
and you know, hearing you talk about it, actually, one thing I've never realized this about running with MTT, and this, I'm not trying to sell it on you because, you know what's best for you, but one way that it's different than running just with one or two other people is that there are literally hundreds of people on each of those weekends. And so I can run at the front of the pack for a while, and then without saying anything to anybody, not, oh, I'm so sorry, I need to slow down, hold on, do you mind if I stretch? I don't have to say anything to a soul. I can just start slowing down, and then there's other people. Right. No matter how slow or fast you go, there's always people. So I've never felt that pressure. That's really interesting. And honestly, I've so rarely run anything in between. I'm either completely alone or I'm with hundreds of people.
Yeah.
It's been very rare in my life that I've run with one or two or three or four people. And come to think of it, even though I've never articulated it to myself, it's been probably for the reasons that you describe, to feel like I'm going to have to conform and match their expectations.
Yeah. No, and a lot of people, I mean, I know I'm the rarity because so many people talk about it as either a very competitive thing where they want and need people to push them because they're trying to reach some goal, and I've got my own goals. Or I hear people talk about it in terms of a social deal. Like I'm as unsociable as I get when I'm running. It's like I'm not smiling. I'm not. It's a very like I said. It's more of a spiritual or more just I'm pretty much introverted, and I do some of my best thinking out there.
Absolutely. I sometimes have said to people, especially my daughter, like, instead of, bye, I'm going off for a run, bye, I'm going off for a think.
Right.
Going off to do my thinking, I'll be back later, not going off to do my running.
I'm curious how being a runner translates into being a teacher. I know as a teacher, there's days that are hard. You have students who've come in and had a hard day. I imagine I know there is. My wife was a teacher for a long time. Just the stress involved in that.
Right.
I just wonder how running has prepared you. I'm always curious with different professions, how running.
Right. I do think in just a general way, it's such a huge stress reliever, and it definitely helps me put things in perspective. I can't go for an hour-long run and not feel better. Like that has never happened, that I've gone for an hour-long run and felt worse. So whatever stress is in my day, and again, it's kind of a general statement that I would think applies to anybody who has a job, because all jobs are sometimes stressful. And then I think running has made me a stronger person, a more patient person, a more joyful person, and all of those translate into being a better teacher. Probably the last one most of all, just feeling more relaxed, happy, especially when I run in the morning before work, which is, to me, those runs are like 3 times as good as any other time to run. Running before the sun comes up or with the sunrise just changes my whole perspective on the day. And probably, I think sometimes my kids think almost like she's like insanely happy. What's wrong with her? How is she coming in here with that darn smile every single day? But it makes me happy.
So you never hear him say, Miss Fletcher must not have run today.
No, because I'm always running. So that day doesn't happen very often.
Do you run pretty much every day then?
I do. I've been really easy on myself since the last big run that I know we're going to talk about. It's really important to me to fully recover and to have a great summer of running. And so I've been a little bit extra careful, but except for the couple of times in the last 9 years that I've been injured, And it really has just been a couple of times, and nothing even with a name, but like some kind of tendonitis thing here or there. I would say I usually run about 5 times a week. And I don't plan my rest days, but I just know they're going to happen. I know something's going to happen no matter what, as a busy adult, that, which is why I don't plan them, because I know they're going to happen no matter what. Yeah.
So let's go into it then. We've been hinting towards, you recently ran 100 miles. And so I just want to trace that whole story. How did it first occur to you that I think I want to run 100 miles?
I mean, I guess there's the personal side of it, and then there's the side of it that's connected to what I do as a teacher and what the run means for the students. So the
personal side, let's start with.
Yeah. Gosh, I don't even know if I've fully articulated it to myself, but I definitely have always had more of an interest in going further as opposed to going faster. If I had to pick one of those, I would always pick going further. So instead of wanting to run a faster marathon, I, in the back of my mind, sometime the last few years, started to think more about what would it be like to run past a marathon. And not even necessarily for that day that I would do it, but for the training for it. All of the long, slow miles of thinking. And I just find that the more I become a runner, and I hope this doesn't make me sound really obsessive, but the more I become a runner, the less interest I have in the other things that I used to spend my time on. I mean, I have no interest in television whatsoever at this point. I still have Netflix for my daughter because I have an 18-year-old daughter, but I don't have cable. I've actually never owned a cell phone, which is something that people are really shocked. That usually shocks people more than that I just ran 100 miles, especially my teenage students.
I can imagine.
Yeah, they can't comprehend that. So these things that maybe would take up my time, television and scrolling through whatever I don't know what people are looking at on their phones, but they seem like they're doing it an awful lot. So those things don't take up my day. So I have, for an adult who's a parent, and I'm a single mom and I have a job, I have a surprising amount of free time, which sounds odd. I almost feel guilty saying it because I hear so many people saying they don't have any free time. But I do have some free time, and I like to fill it running. And so it just naturally became, I could put in these hours and I could run even more. And I probably came across, I listen to a lot of podcasts. Right. Now I'm going to add yours to my list. But I read. Of course I read Born to Run, because who hasn't read Born to Run? And so I really connected, especially with Born to Run, with that sense of running being something that brings joy and peace and helps people put their priorities in order. And those are all things that I'm always interested in doing. And so it seemed like it seemed like it could be something that I could strive towards, not push like a maniac towards, but that I could reach for.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that's been me. And I don't know, I've been far more intrigued. And I think it's because when I ran my first marathon at Richmond, I finished 2 of them.
Yeah.
Didn't finish 1. But the first one I finished, and it was barely within even the time limit. But the feeling was, holy cow, I never thought I could run that far.
Right.
Never did was I...
You didn't think about the time.
I didn't think about the time, and I think it always just started. I wonder if I can finish that. And then for my birthday, just this past April, I was trying to run and support a group of students and a teacher that I'd made friends with out in Missouri. They're special needs students, and they've run this race every year. It's the Run for Respect, and they're trying to eliminate the word retarded and replace it with respect. And so I was trying to do something. And the first thought in my mind was, well, I want to run further than I've ever run. That's what I want to do. And so that day I just ran 27 miles, which was only slightly further. But, and I don't know really what it is about me, other than that's as close as I can think of it. But I mean, I appreciate people who run really fast.
Yeah.
But when I hear, like, I'm intrigued by these 24-hour races, this idea of getting out and just running for 24 hours and seeing how far you can go in 24 hours. I hinted towards you. I'm fascinated by the whole 100 miles. It's like, you know, that's the next thing behind a marathon. You say I started and finished that far. It's kind of,
right.
How far can I really go?
Yeah.
So I'm glad you said that. So you decided I'm going to run this 100-mile race, but you had a special cause. Talk to us a little bit about what that was all about. And
I'm so thankful to have the cause because it's so motivating to add that layer on top. So I'm already motivated for the reasons I just gave you that are kind of intrinsic and personal. But then to have this other cause, it just makes it so purposeful and fulfilling in a whole other way as well. And that it actually really started 2 years ago. I was on the internet, again, sort of random, kind of like starting running. It wasn't a huge sudden inspiration. It was more of a small inkling. I was on the internet and I saw something about, I saw two stories. One, a teacher in Chesterfield who had run on his school track all day and all night and to raise some money for his school a number of years ago. And then one about a principal up in New York State who'd done the same thing in a snowstorm to raise money for his school all day and all night. And I thought, well, I couldn't, this was 2 years ago exactly. Well, I couldn't run all night, but I could run all school day. And so I went to a faculty meeting and presented that idea, knowing that some of the teachers, it's kind of hard to explain, but just due to the way funding works at our school, and I think at most public schools, some of the clubs like yearbook and newspaper that are clubs and classes at the same time, they generally have to have a large fundraiser, each of them, to raise money for their basic needs. Right. So the newspaper teacher, who's a wonderful person, who's in the little GoFundMe movie that was made about this year's run, Carrie Hicks said, "Oh, you know, I would love to work on this together with you, and I could be the person behind the scenes, and my newspaper students could go out and fundraise for you in the county of Louisa. They could go into town and they could ask businesses, and that would be a great experience for them. And, you know, this was a great project we could all do together." And so with her help that first year, I ran all day, and I was really scared. And so I was grateful that I actually didn't start till about 8:30 in the morning, and then ran till maybe 3:15. So about 6.5 hours. And I want to say I was right around 40 miles. We're not really sure because I was wearing a Fitbit because I didn't have my own watch. And so I borrowed someone's Fitbit. And later found out they're not very accurate. They tend to underestimate. I don't know if you know that about them. But especially for a runner, they're more accurate for if you're walking. But anyway, approximately 40 miles. We're not entirely sure. And all of my fears just washed away. Like, I had thought, oh, what if I can't do this? Not so much the distance as the time on my feet. I wasn't used to running for more than maybe 4 hours at a time. That would have been the outer limits. And so the thought of running for 6.5 hours. But of course, lots of people take 6.5 hours to run, you know, a marathon. Yes. So that was really, I'm
well aware of that.
And my first marathon was somewhere between 4.5 and 5 hours. So that should have been a comfort. And it was wonderful. I had an amazing time. It felt completely different doing it in that context. The kids participated. They all came down to the track, like the whole school, not just the newspaper kids. They came down to the track. The culinary arts students made these, they call them Fletcher bars. They're like Cliff bars, basically. So they gave me my fuel.
What a great
I know, it was awesome.
School community
yeah, it was a
experience.
Whole, everything about it, from the fundraising in town to the businesses helping to support it financially to the classes coming down, like the math classes came down and calculated pace, and then a lot of kids just came down and walked with me or ran with me, and gym classes obviously came, and it was just so much better than I'd imagined in terms of, you know, what it felt like physically and mentally. Like, their support made all the difference in the world. And still to this day, because now I've done it, this was my third year doing it this past time, I've just been shocked at how that love and support makes such a difference in how I feel physically. It's like, I can't explain it, and it's not something quantifiable, but a long training run on my own, and I like to run alone,
right.
So this is particularly strange to me. I like to run alone, but a long training run on my own is just so much harder. There's discomfort and there's boredom too. When you get past 30 miles, there's boredom. Yeah. There's exhaustion, and yet on this day that I do this with these kids, it's like Christmas to me. I mean, that's the best. It's just so exciting and fulfilling and just wonderful. I think the kids often tell me that I'm smiling the entire time. Like, what's wrong with you, Miss Fletcher? Why did you not stop smiling? Even when you were past 40 or 50 miles. But I'm just loving it. I mean, there's no other way to put it. And so that was the first year. And then last year, I realized, well, I really want to hit 50. And that was only 10 miles further. That didn't seem like much harder. And I just knew I just have to get there a little earlier. So last year, I bought a watch. So I wouldn't have to wear a Fitbit, because I discovered that had been inaccurate. So I bought a watch, and I had to get a triathlete watch, actually, because Garmin's don't last quite long enough. Like a standard Garmin doesn't last long enough. And I just showed up at the track earlier. I showed up, I can't remember if it was 6:30, but I ended up running for 9 hours. But I was done. Each time I made sure I was done by the end of the school day, so that I could celebrate with the kids. And they had a pep rally for me those first 2 years.
Very cool.
Yeah, so I hit 50 in the nick of time last year. Went down for my pep rally, and they had me do a victory lap. And Louisa is incredibly school-spirited, so they have a cannon blasted, and they had me run through the football tunnel, and there was smoke. And yeah.
I love it.
It was a big event. And then it was this year, so to finally get to the 100 miles, this year I had decided that I was going to try to run 100 miles for it, and so finally do what those, that teacher and that principal had done that I'd read about 2 years ago. And so I trained from early December on, knowing that I was aiming for that 100. I did the Richmond Marathon, and then I rested for a couple weeks, and then really picked right back up at kind of 50-mile weeks, knowing that this was my goal, and did it.
And you ran this, when was this race, or this run at
this
the school?
Event? It was April 9th and 10th. So
okay.
It actually started much later than it was supposed to. I was supposed to start really early. It was snowing that day. It was that crazy day that we had all that snow.
Right.
Oh, you can see it in the movie you can watch it. So I ended up not starting until almost 10 o'clock in the morning on Monday, the 9th of April, just shy of 10 o'clock, maybe quarter till. And then I ran until just shy of 11 o'clock the next day. So it ended up actually taking me 25 hours. I didn't do it in 24. The plan was that I would do it in 24. It was fine. I like you, was not caught up in the time, but technically it was 25 hours. Yeah. And
so and I think the GoFundMe is still live for this.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
And I'll make sure when I share this, there'll be links to it. What are you raising money for as part of this 100-mile run?
Right. So the goal has always been to raise scholarship money for students who are not only in financial need, and Louisa County has close to a 50% free and reduced lunch rate, which means there are a lot of students who would have a very hard time paying for college, because those numbers really correspond. The way financial aid works, if a student qualifies for free or reduced lunch, then when they go to fill out what's called the FAFSA, the financial aid paperwork that they fill out, that their expected family contribution will definitely be a zero. So to know that we have half of our kids in that kind of financial need, and that those kids, plus all the others who will be close to that mark, even if not quite at it, are going to have a tremendously difficult time paying for college. And yet I have so many amazing students, just incredible students, who work really hard, who amaze me with their ability and their passion and their commitment, and may not be able to pay for school. And so many of them have overcome just incredible hurdles in their lives, whether at home or in school, or, I work with all kinds of students who've had a huge variety of life experiences. And, by the time you're 18 years old, most people have had some big obstacles, but these are kids who've had really, really big obstacles, and yet have endured. And so those are the kids that we're trying to reward this scholarship to, because I feel like the run metaphorically stands for what they've been doing in their lives. So they've persevered, and they've shown commitment, and they've put in the hard work, and they've endured all of the qualities of a long distance runner. So we've always made that parallel, that the scholarship money that we've raised, and this again is the third year that we've done this, is going to go towards students who are selected by committee, and I'm on the committee, that embody those traits, that have endured through obstacles, have stayed the path, who have managed to be incredible students, and who have really loved their community. And there are so many students like that at Louisa County High School. It's getting very, very hard to make these selections each year when the time comes.
Where you can hear you just have a heart for these kids. I'm just curious where that comes from. And especially these kids that have overcome.
Yeah.
You just hear it in you.
Yeah. I've definitely had a number of obstacles in my own life. I think we all have, and I can't help but see those kids and feel like they deserve the same opportunity as everybody else. And there are plenty of young people that I know who have worked really hard and been really committed, and are amazing students, the valedictorian of the class, and students who have made, have a GPA of 4.5 when they graduate from high school. And a lot of those students, I know they're going to be okay. I know that they're taken care of. But I think there's a group of students who have worked just as hard, and I'm not as sure that they're taken care of. And I think they need and deserve this extra piece that I'm happy, more than happy to provide, that I love to provide. So I feel like everybody benefits.
Yeah. So what is the goal this year then?
Well, the part that was new this year that hasn't been a piece the last 2 years was that GoFundMe, the company, contacted Carrie Hicks. She's the organizer that I mentioned before. Contacted Carrie Hicks and I through an email, and it was the kind of email that we could have absolutely in a busy day just not even noticed. Yeah, and thank goodness we noticed that. Oh, what's that? Did you see this? And it was from a woman named Jackie who said, we came across your story. Oh, and I should say, I'm sorry, most of our fundraising, almost all of it, the first 2 years, was in town, in the town of Louisa, in the town of Mineral, in the parts of the county where their business is. And the first year, they were able to raise about $5,000 that way. So we gave 2 scholarships the first year. And then the second year, we raised, I think, $5,600. And we gave, I don't want to get this wrong, gosh, 3 or 4. Shoot. We added another one. And we can play with the numbers how we want. So we can give a larger one to one student and a smaller one depending on need. But all of that money, both those years, was raised, 99% of it was raised from these really generous businesses that just trusted, this woman that we don't know personally says she can run all school day. Okay. A very, very kind and supportive. Yeah. And then this year, GoFundMe, like I said, contacted us. And when we called them up, they said, we want to make a movie about your run. And we noticed you already have a GoFundMe page, which was true. We had a GoFundMe page that hadn't made a whole lot of money that we had started because there were people who were asking who weren't business owners. So a relative here, or maybe a runner that I would see on an MTT run, or a friend of Carrie Hicks's. There were these people that were asking who wanted to find a way. They said, can I write you a check? What should I do? And so we had started this GoFundMe page because there was this interest. But we hadn't really developed it beyond. There's this place you can go to if you have no other way to really give, if you're not representing a business. And then when they called us and said, we saw your page and we think what you're doing is great, and we have started this new part of the company GoFundMe, where GoFundMe Studios, which had just started at the end of 2017, comes and will make a movie, and at no cost to us,
right? And
we'll make this little documentary, and then we'll add it to your page, and it should really help to increase your fundraising. Of course, on so many levels, that was exciting for us. Yeah. We knew the kids would love it. Like, here comes Hollywood, and they're going to make this movie, and it was just like that. It felt just like Hollywood coming to this small town, and they were very professional and wonderful people. They were all really wonderful people. We ended up working with a few key figures and continue to be in communication with them. And because of that movie being added to the page, and that happened, it took them about 3 weeks to put the movie together after they had come and filmed that weekend. Well, so they came and filmed the weekend before the run, and then they did some shots that you can see in the movie were filmed ahead of time of me training in the town of Louisa, and some interviews, especially with the former recipients of the scholarship from the 2 other years. And then they stayed for the 24-hour run, of course. And then they left in a whirl of activity, raced off back to California. And 3 weeks later, they added this amazing, I think it's amazing. I know you've seen it.
Yes. The video.
This great 10-minute video to our page. And that, I do hope that everyone listening, even if they can't donate, if they could share it on social media. I have yet to meet a person who's watched it and hasn't been moved by it. Yeah. I think it's not what people expect.
Well, and we will definitely share the video, and I'll definitely promote it once we publish this. But I got, kind of like you, I got a random, because I've done some GoFundMe stuff, supported different people through GoFundMes, and so I get periodically GoFundMe
You're on
emails,
their email list,
and I just kind of ignore it. But this one said,
runner.
Teacher, runner, 100 miles, all of those things intrigued me.
You were triggered.
I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to watch this
and
thing.
in your neck of the woods.
And so, that's the piece. So I watched this thing all the way through, and literally I was in tears. I was at work, and I was just moved by this thing. Yeah. And then by the end of it, I thought, well, this is exactly what I try to do with my podcast. And I always get people mess with me because I stalk people on Facebook to see if I can interview them. I said, I need to go back and find out where this woman is from.
Right.
And then in the very beginning, they're talking Louisa. I don't know why I didn't pick up on that the first time through. I was just taken so much by what you were doing.
I'd be in Denver or something.
Right. And Louisa, that's
just down the road.
Right up the road if it's Louisa, Virginia. So anyhow, it ended up being a real close to home story. And then I did stalk you out on Facebook. And I'm like, hey, we got some common friends. And so I think everybody will be moved by the video.
I'm not a crier at all. And I'm in it, of course. So there's that element of kind of like the self-consciousness of hearing your own voice, like I will feel when I hear this podcast, that could have made me just feel distracted, but I really was pulled in right away. I think it was so well done.
And then I had to, because then I'm like, what kind of media program do they have there at Louisa? Because this is an awesome video. Who put it? But then I clicked it all together that it was something GoFundMe had done. I didn't realize they have their own sort of. What a smart move, because it is well done, and when you do something like that and get it out there, obviously they benefit from that as well. I am curious because, like you mentioned, there were several students that were interviewed. What does that mean to you? Raising this money, hearing their stories, and I've heard you talk about gratitude. There's nothing but gratitude that comes out of those kids in that video.
Yeah. And when they each came from their colleges. So Jamesia came from the University of Virginia, and then Sally and Brent, the other two, there were 3 students interviewed total in the movie. They came up from Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond. And I got to spend the day with them, really. So I got to spend the day with them when we interviewed. And then, as you'll see in the movie, they showed up and surprised me in the middle of the night. And again, I'll say this about GoFundMe. They weren't just amazing producers and directors. They were just really good, kind people. And they had arranged that, knowing that that would be inspiring, right. Knowing that that would motivate me and keep me going in the middle of the night. Those kids showed up. I mean, I know they're not. They're 19, 20 years old now, but they showed up in the middle of the night to run with me for hours. Right. Just incredible. And yeah, it meant the world to me. And when I spoke earlier about that immeasurable, like unquantifiable factor that is so separate from whatever's going on your Garmin, I'm talking exactly about that sense of connection and joy and gratitude that came. I know I felt it. And then when I watched the movie, and it's exactly what brought me to tears, I can see that they felt it as well. And I just feel like that's just at the heart of why I run. It really is. And even when I'm running alone, I know that ultimately I'm running for a bigger purpose, whether it's to improve myself as an individual, or to use myself as an individual and the talents that I have, which, aren't many, but I have a few. Yeah. And running just happens to be one. Running lots of miles relatively slowly just happens to be one. And that to know that I can use that skill that I've worked on over the last decade or so to help other people is just like, what could be better than that? There's nothing better than that to me in my little life.
Right. Well, you said it early on, and it's been the most surprising discovery for me about the running community. And obviously, every community kind of has their deal, and there's a lot of good people in all these different activities. But in running, in particular, I have been surprised. Now, I'll preface that by saying I used to think runners are just a bunch of crazy people. What are you doing going out there and spending all this time running?
Right.
But they are all so very purpose-driven. Right. I don't know that I've seen another community that supplements what they're doing with this idea of, I want to help people, I want to raise money for this. I mean, there's just countless. Yeah. You go to any race, and they're just bibs. I run, for Meg and to raise different awareness around her story. I don't know what you think that might be about the running community that loves tacking on this additional purpose on top of a time or a distance or a goal.
I feel like even when we're not running for a cause directly, there's that sense that there's meaning behind it. And I do think, like you just said before you were a runner, you just thought, what are these people doing? It looks like, let's be honest, it looks like a really meaningless activity. Sure it really does. It looks pretty silly. Like there's not points, there's no team, it's just going outside and running. And I know, especially what I do at the track for this fundraiser for my school, that I'm running in circles. I mean, talk about the appearance of total meaninglessness.
400 laps.
400 laps to make 100 miles. It looks just so meaningless when you take it out of context. Right. And I think most runners have this contradictory feeling that what they're doing is powerful and meaningful because they're changing on the inside and they know it, even if it's not apparent on the outside. They have this sense that they're doing something purposeful because it means a lot to them. And then I think maybe, and I'm just guessing, but I think this is my experience of it, that we feel like we're doing something powerful and profound in some way because we can feel ourselves becoming better human beings. And then we just want to show that. We want to use that and like attach it to something. And so I attached it to like the nearest thing possible, which was the kids that I teach and love because I happen to be a teacher. But if I was a nurse, I'm sure I would, or a doctor, I'm sure I would attach it to my patients. Or if I, had loved someone who'd passed away from breast cancer, I'm sure that I would want to attach this meaningful, profound activity that that brings so much joy in my life to the love I have for that person or these people. I think that's a natural, like when you find joy and meaning in your life, you want to use it to help others.
Yeah, you may have just as perfectly as anybody described why we're sitting here doing this, because that was beautiful. But it is. That's kind of after I finished my first marathon, I crossed the finish line, and something overwhelmed me, but it wasn't a sense of sort of personal accomplishment. It was like, this needs to, and I always say, God just put that on my heart, that what I was feeling there needed to transcend me and go into other people. It was such a powerful, and I love what you talk, just this sense that I'm becoming a better me. There's power in that. There's a lot of energy in that, and being able to transfer that.
And even before these runs where I was fundraising, I was using that energy, like we talked earlier, as a teacher. I found myself, not that I've never been a grumpy teacher to be fair to myself, but I was a more joyful teacher, and I was a more patient teacher, and I found myself enjoying my work even more. And I knew it had something to do with these quiet, still, transformative runs I was doing, around a circle or an oval with pebbles in my pocket at 4 a.m. And so at first it came out with my students in that way. And I think if I were to ask a student of mine from 8 or 9 years ago, they would have said, I think most students would say she was always a happy person, and she was cheerful, and I try to be funny, and I'm just very lighthearted as a teacher, I think, in general. And then just in the last 3 years, that's sort of, it's almost just like I took that spirit of it and I just found a way to express it in an even more tangible way. Okay, we're going to take that spirit and I'm going to take it to this extreme. I'm going to do this extreme run, and I'm going to represent that love I feel for my students and that joy I feel when I'm running. I'm going to channel all of that into these 24 hours on this track, and then on top of all of the joy that's there and the love that's there on that track for those 24 hours, on top of that, we get to raise money that will help these kids who so deserve some assistance in achieving their own dreams. Which is why it feels like Christmas to me. I could tell you get it. This is like the best of everything all in one.
No, it is so awesome. I'm curious, this joy and this spirit, and clearly it makes an impact on your students. I'm curious about the rest of the teachers that you work with. Have you seen this rub off? Do you have any teachers who've taken up running, or any of the teachers who say, I think I want to be as happy as her. I think I'll start early morning runs?
I'm not sure that they know that. You might just think, no, I get so much support from my colleagues. I don't know that they see the direct line between, she seems like, this happy-go-lucky person, and she's doing this run. Maybe they do. I don't know. I hope I'm not a person who, preaches running. I don't want to be that person. And partly because it doesn't have to be running. There's so many things. Running is just what I put in that spot, but there's so many things that could be in that spot. I don't even think they necessarily have to be any kind of form of physical movement, really. It's just a passion that means a lot and helps someone to transform into a better version of themselves. That's all. That's what it is. But a few teachers seem like they've, like I can think of a fellow English teacher who said, I've been walking, but I'll try to move it up to a jog. And then during the day, for all 3 of these years I've been doing this now, the students and the teachers come out. So there are teachers with me running as well, or walking, or jogging, or walking, jogging, or whatever they feel comfortable doing.
Yeah, no, I asked. Well, a couple of reasons I asked. One, I have my own work team, and it's sort of, there's clearly a half of that are really inspired and taken by that, and then there's the other half that are the former me. You're an idiot. What are you doing?
Yeah.
But the other thing is it is again, with the running community, I'm involved again with Meg's Miles and that page. And literally over the last 4 years, it has just been inspiring me to watch all these journeys take off.
Right.
Solely because of the people that they are surrounded by in this group. And it's such a the beauty of this group is I'm active on Facebook. I've been a part of different groups, and this group is just all accepting in a world, I think, some days that isn't accepting enough. It's non-judgmental in a world that too many days seems to be too judgmental. And I think that spirit tied to this, I think there's people that see that and think, that must have some connection to running. You know? And so they watch that and they're inspired by it, and suddenly they're chasing their own goals and running.
And the distances that my colleagues are seeing me run are so extreme that I hope it doesn't, but I would be totally understanding if it seems a bit inaccessible. They're not seeing me on that morning that I just go out and run 4 miles and then, maybe that sounds excessive, but that morning that I go out and run 3 miles and then think, oh no, I woke up too late, I have to get home and make my lunch or I'll never make it to work on time. So there are plenty of those moments. It's not like every run is 100 miles. But I understand, just because I can remember being a person who didn't run 100 miles. Like last year I was a person who didn't run 100 miles. That might just seem almost just so unfathomable that it might seem almost more like some magical thing rather than something that I have to steadily work on every day for years to reach. And I worry that the kids see it that way too. And we made a real effort this year to show the students my training. So Carrie Hicks, again, I like to say she's the brains and I'm the brawn. Carrie Hicks, and she's a fellow English teacher, the one who works with the newspaper students. And then this year, actually, it was the newspaper class and her leadership class. So twice as many students working to get ready for the run. And they're all amazing kids. But the kids and Carrie put together a display for the cafeteria. So we have a big screen in the cafeteria, and they put a U.S. map on it, and then made a little emoji of me with a little blonde ponytail. I look like Miss Pac-Man with a ponytail. And from early January until the run, they would show my mileage. So I would come in every week and I'd say, this week I ran, 72 miles. And my highest mileage was 97 miles. And it added up so that the emoji ended up in Florida. So the kids in the cafeteria saw, in January, Miss Fletcher started right here in Louisa, Virginia on the map. And she's run so much in training that she's run herself all the way to Florida. And it was really important to me that we did that so that they don't just think, especially because they're younger, that I wouldn't have understood at their age. Yeah. They might think, well, maybe she just got this special talent, and then one day she just rolled out of bed and ran 100 miles, which couldn't be further from the truth. I have this terrible asthma, and I didn't start running until I was 35. I don't think I necessarily have any natural inclination towards running. Well, no, I think all human beings have a natural inclination toward. I think we're all, meant to run, built to run, but certainly no more ability than the average person. And I wanted them to see that it really does take hard work, endurance, commitment, perseverance, and then to connect with that themselves in all the ways that they can as students, as young people with passions and interests and dreams. Yeah.
And so this is sort of a personal help question, because I hinted, and so I'm intrigued by if I had to say this, I'm running a 35-mile race in September. It'll be the first trail race, first ultra race, and so it keeps climbing. I'm smart enough to know I'll finish that, and then it'll immediately be, okay, what's next? I know what's
a 50, or you jump right to 100.
It might jump right to 100 based on this conversation.
Okay. Well,
so you just said your longest training week was 97 miles. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious so what was your longest run then? You ran 100 miles as the event? What was the longest individual run leading up to that?
So this is going to be shocking. I mean, I'm sure, well, you've probably read enough to know a little bit about it. It sounds like you're already sort of feeling the edges of that. I read a whole lot online, and I do have one friend, Whitney, who you might want to interview because she is an amazing ultra runner who did a 24-hour race recently, and I don't think she hit 1:30, but she was pretty darn close to it. Yeah, I think that was actually to qualify her for the national ultra running team. So if you need me,
24-hour national team,
I can help you Facebook stalk her and find her. Yeah, she's
she
amazing.
May be friends with the Harvey Lewis that I talked with you about because he's big into the 24-hour national team too. So but I will definitely seek your help to help me stalk her out.
And she's an acquaintance who I met through the marathon training team in the summer. And I remember actually one time that she was running with our little team, or our big team, really, it's a lot of people. And we did a 20-miler, and then she said, okay, bye, I think I'm going to go run the route backwards now. So that was just completely normal to her. So she was my one personal connection that I had all the way back to last summer to these kinds of crazy distances. And then on a run over the winter, I met someone who's more like me as an ultra runner, who's not a professional ultra runner, more an everyday kind of ultra runner. And he gave me some really good tips, and I ended up asking both of them some last minute questions on Facebook, in the week before the run, kind of minute questions about blisters and socks and things like that. But most of the information I got was online. So I had to put a lot of trust in some, but they're reliable websites that I've run across many times just as a marathon runner. And everybody said, do not, well, all right, maybe 93% of them said, do not run more than 50 miles. Maybe 60 miles, but preferably not more than 50 miles at one time to prepare for your 100-miler. And I think for two reasons. One is that if you do a 50-mile training run, you're going to take some time to recover for that. And so if you end up taking 2 weeks or even just a week to recover from that, that's time that you're not spending training because you're in recovery mode, not training mode. And then the other real possibility, the second part, is that it's totally possible that you'll hurt yourself. You'll get tendonitis, you'll get a stress fracture, and then you're not going to be able to do your 100-miler at all. So as counterintuitive as it sounds, the recommendation seems to be don't do a really long training run, which even for marathon runners seems hard to kind of grasp, because even for marathon, you do that 20-mile training run probably 3 times. And people new to the marathon always say, but what about those final 6? And and then they just get silence, like, oh, you'll figure it out. But then you do it and you realize that probably was good advice. And it's for the same reason, that you'll potentially hurt yourself, that you'll take too long to recover, and therefore it'll mess up your training in the week after. But to say to someone who's going to run 100 miles that you should never run more than 50 miles in one shot prior, it just leaves a lot to the imagination.
At least 50 miles is what it leaves. It leaves 50.
It really does.
At least with a marathon, you're only leaving 6.
And then to someone who's used to just 5Ks and 10Ks, it makes no sense at all. And to the point that I was almost, like, I told one of the gym teachers at the high school, and I felt sort of embarrassed to even say it, because I felt, now I've done it, so I can speak more confidently. Like, I pulled it off. I ran my 100 miles, and I did it doing what I was advised online. But I remember this conversation with her, and she's amazing. She's a wonderful gym teacher, and she's run a marathon. But saying it to her, I felt kind of silly. I felt like I could hear myself, and I thought, she sounds like she doesn't know what she's doing. She doesn't know what she's about to get into. And especially with the fundraising aspect, like, this wasn't just me doing this thing for fun and maybe it wouldn't work out and I'd only do 80, but I'd still get to eat a large pizza and pat myself on the back. This was, we've collected money from businesses, because we did that again this year in addition to the GoFundMe money. This amazing group of people is coming all the way from California
you had to
film this movie, And what if, the articles I read on the internet weren't right? Kind of like that time that you looked up that lump you could feel in your shoulder and you thought you were dying, and really that wasn't it at all. Like, it's not like the internet is always reliable. Right. So that was a little nerve-wracking.
You started to question internet coaching, self-diagnosis.
A little bit. But what they recommend, because you're not running more than 50 at one time, is that you do a lot of what they're calling doubles. Yeah. So you'll do 30 on a Saturday and then wake up Sunday morning on tired legs and run 20. Yeah. So I did plenty of those. And when I would do those, I would be running at a pace that I knew, maybe this wasn't what I was supposed to do, but I was running at a pace that was not fast by any means, but faster than I would be running when I did my 100. So I might run 30 miles at a 10.5 minute pace, knowing that I had enough wiggle room to do a 14-minute pace on the day of the 100 miler. So I would try to tell myself, when I needed comforting, well, if you can run 30 and then 20 the next day at a 10.5 minute pace, you should be fine. And I don't know, I definitely felt huge doubts and anxieties, but I did simultaneously feel this just total peace and confidence. I never panicked. I really didn't. And then I knew that there would be that unquantifiable element that I keep talking about, that factor, that love at the track, that support. And one of the things that the students did, every single student at Louisa County High School, so we're talking about 1,500 students, was this is so sweet to me just thinking about it. And I get to keep these for the rest of my life. They each wrote me a little note. And nobody wrote a mean note. I mean, these are 1,500 teenagers. someone could have written don't get caught by a bear or don't, I don't know, just some wise crap kind of comment. Nobody did that. So 1,500 little notes from each of these students telling me that they believed in me, that they loved me, that they knew I could do it, that it meant something to them, that it inspired them. And then we had all these in this big bucket. And the idea, which it was the idea from the get-go, and it is exactly what we did, was that when things got really tough for me at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, that the newspaper and leadership kids who stayed all night, they camped out in tents, even though it was freezing cold. It was very cold. It was below freezing and snowing for much of the run. They jogged beside me and read these notes with a flashlight to help inspire me and keep me going. So that's when I wasn't looking at splits on my watch. I was listening to these sweet kids show me, and a lot of them don't know me. I mean, I teach juniors, so the 9th and 10th graders haven't had me yet. And it's a big school, so there are lots of 11th, there are several 11th grade English teachers. So most of them I won't ever teach. Although I took the ones that were from my class, and I didn't read them ahead of time, but I put them in an envelope and I wrote, very special, Miss Fletcher's first block class. And when I was at my absolute lowest, I said, get the very special envelope. And they read those to me. And of course they were even more personal, because these are kids who knew me and had heard me talking about my training the whole time and had kept me motivated and enthusiastic all through the winter about this event that I was going to attempt. So I knew that magic, that immeasurable, that extra piece, this love and support that somehow makes all the difference in the world. And then I just knew that I'd done everything I could do. I mean, it's just one of those life situations where you've done everything you can do. And that everybody believed in me. Nobody, not the film crew who didn't know me coming into it and had every reason to be worried about their investment. Never, ever did any of them express any doubt in me. Not friends, not family, not 1,500 students, not a single colleague, not any community member who donated or who heard about it. And I know it's just, I think it's just natural to have that moment. Maybe, the person working at the business who just found out that this teacher wants to run 100 miles and would they donate? There might have been those moments that they kept to themselves, like, could someone really do that? Is that really possible? But none of that was ever expressed to me, and that's what matters. Yeah. Nobody ever doubted to me that I could do it. which is just incredible. And it's like, that's such a gift for me for the rest of my life in everything. To know that people believed in me that unconditionally and wholeheartedly is just incredible.
I don't know if you listened, because I know we talked that you listened to Rich Roll and his podcast, and I was listening. I was driving a lot last week, and he interviewed Dr. Michael
Gervais. I heard that we've listened to all the same ones.
Yeah. And I actually put something on Facebook about it. I was so moved by it. It was such a simple sort of quick go over, but I had to go back and listen to it and listen to it.
What
Gervais said that, I think one of the most loving things we can do for somebody or anybody is to come alongside them and let them know what is possible.
Yeah.
And then you walk them to it and through it and help them achieve that. And he wasn't talking like, you love your family. He was talking, this is the most powerful way you can love anybody.
Right. Is
help them see what is possible.
Right.
And it sounds like that in a big sort of way, collective way. That's what you're... they didn't actually help you discover it, but I don't think there's much difference, really. If I get this thought in my head, it's going one or two ways. Everybody is going to walk to that possibility.
It's almost more profound because, like you said, most of them aren't, 97% of them aren't runners. Right. Everyone from, the mayor to the guy who owns the lumber company to the 14-year-old ninth grader who just sees me in the hall occasionally to the, well, actually, a few of the members of the film crew were actually pretty good runners, but most of them overall were not runners. And for them to believe in me over this dream of mine, this idea of mine, that honestly sounds so preposterous. Yeah. It sounds not possible to most people. It really, and we know that it's possible, and that just hard work, and you go from a marathon to the 35 miles to the 50. It's it's very possible. But if I was a 14-year-old kid and someone said, "Oh, that middle-aged teacher over there is going to run 100 miles next week," I would imagine that the expression on my face would be one of just total disbelief and doubt. But they never, ever expressed that to me. Yeah. Which, as a teacher, I know that when I believe in a student in that same way, wholeheartedly and unconditionally, they are so much more likely to believe in themselves. But those aren't the kinds of things we apply to that doesn't mean that I turn around and apply it to myself as an adult. I'm not that kind with myself. And so for them to have done that for me, that will, I have the bucket of little messages they wrote me, and I have the knowledge that they all believed in me. And when I'm struggling with whatever I'm struggling with down the road, I can tap right into that. And it's such a gift that
I find that interesting. I mean, that's powerful to me that a lot of people would say, well, if I struggle with something down the road, I'll know I ran 100 miles. You're focused far more on this large group of people believed I could do it. And that's, I think that's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
It's not lost on me that, so this started 2 or 3 years ago, and you ran 40 miles, and then you ran 50 miles, and so now this year you ran 100 miles. It may be too soon after, but are you... Next year, clearly this is not something that's leaving your heart anytime soon in terms of helping with these scholarships. So, have you given any thought? Do I do 100 miles next year, or do I have a bigger dream in mind next year?
Well, I was about to say he's joking, but I actually don't think he's joking. My principal, who's a very... Lee Downey, the principal of Louisa County High School, is such a kind man, and understandably was worried when we first came to him, Carrie and I, this year, and said that this year I wanted to try to run 100 miles because he cares and doesn't want to see someone that he cares about hurt or sick or any of the thoughts that come to mind about what someone could do to their body trying to run 100 miles. So he had said right then, that first meeting, I'll let you, but you can't ever run more than this, right? And I don't know if I technically promised, but in my mind I know that I promised, and I think that's fair to not push the mileage. So I wouldn't ever run more than 100 miles, maybe 101. No. that's not where my mind is going. I actually was wandering around in the week or two after with that same question in my mind. I just happened to stumble into a math teacher's classroom, Jesse, and I don't know if he thought about it ahead of time or if it just came right off the top of his head, but he said, you know what you could do? You could run from each school in the county to the next and make a loop and end up at the high school. And we got 4 elementary schools, middle school and high school. And the middle and the high school are almost share a parking lot. I mean, they're right next to each other. But it's a big county. And so he's a math teacher, so he probably already had the numbers in his head. But he verified online. He quickly checked it. It's a little under 50 miles. And I would start at one of the elementary schools, and I would run a lap with the kids there early in the morning. The kids would be involved more. And, well, they run with me at the high school like I described, but it's more of a casual, come on down to the track and join in the fun. And I think this would need to be, I'll meet you at the track at the beginning of the day and I'll run a lap with you and then I'm off down the highway. Yeah. So ideally, the way I imagine it is like hundreds of little kids at the elementary school, and I run a lap. And I've also had an image of myself just sort of darting through the hallway and out the back door kind of thing. And then I'd and obviously I need police escorts. So hopefully they'd be on board with this. Yeah. And it's rural roads. I would run to the next elementary school. There'd be kids waiting at the track for me, do my lap, dart out the backside of the school.
That's a very
and
cool
so on
idea.
And so on. Yeah, so it would be a whole community event. Because it really was this year in terms of support. But of course I stayed at the high school. But I think this year with the event getting as much coverage as it did in the local media, that all the teachers and many of the kids at those other schools caught word of it. And so it would make sense to them next year. They would know why this woman was suddenly flying through their school.
Right. No, you're the 100-mile runner now, and so it'd be kind of a nice tour. I love the idea of these younger kids getting to be exposed to it and be inspired by it.
Yeah. And actually, I think it would be more of a physical feat, to be honest with you, because even though it's just under 50 miles, if I wanted to make sure that there were kids at every school, I'd have to wait until the kids arrive at the first elementary school, and then I'd have to get to the high school before the end of the day.
You'd have to do it a little quicker pace.
I'd have to book it. And then there would be hills. This isn't a track. It's quite hilly in some of those parts. So it might seem like it would be easier, but I actually think it would be more a different physical challenge. A different physical challenge. And it might be the one thing that would get me thinking about speed. The one challenge.
You might have to break your watch. Put the pebbles away and break that watch out.
I might actually have to think a little bit about pace. Yeah. But it would be worth it. It would be a totally different context. Yeah.
So how much longer is the GoFundMe open?
I don't think that there's an end to that while we are still trying to reach our goal.
Cool.
So at this point, we're right at about $23,000.
And the goal is?
The goal that we have right now on GoFundMe is $40,000, but honestly, my dream goal is $100,000 because every year we want to give away $10,000 in scholarships. And actually, we just had our senior awards night last week, and we were able to give away $10,000 in scholarships to 10 students.
Yeah, one of my Facebook friends, I think yours too. Yeah. Her son got one of the scholarships, so that was very cool. We interacted on there, so it's just such a small. Yeah, there's just so many kids. There are so many kids who deserve that any one of those 10 scholarships, and we don't have to divide it up as 10. We could give a slightly larger amount to 5. I like that we've always had some wiggle room there. And so we work with the guidance department to find out where the greatest financial need is. And that helps us make those decisions to an extent. I mean, that's just one of many factors that we're taking into account. And then, again, most importantly, we're looking for students who are strong academically, who know what who know what the next step is in their lives and are passionate about it, but who also have struggled and endured and represent those qualities that I hope that the run represents. So they're like the embodiment of the qualities that the run is meant to represent.
And you would think, well, maybe there's a few kids like that. No, there are dozens of kids like that. And we had close to 40 students apply this year, and we were able to give away 10. And it was really hard for me because I've taught so many of those kids, and to make those decisions about who got the scholarship and who didn't it was just really, really hard. But it's really important to us that it remains sustainable. So if we meet our 40,000, and on the GoFundMe page right now it says goal 40,000. So I'm dreaming big when I imagine that somehow we might ever make it past that. But that would, if we reach 40,000, that would make it sustainable for 4 school years. And then obviously if we made it up to 100,000, that's sustainable for a decade. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, I am really, you're awesome.
Thank you.
Really
You
appreciate
well.
you.
This has been a lot of fun.
No, it is.
My first podcast.
Oh, well, I can't wait to share it. Can't wait to encourage folks to support you and follow along. I will definitely encourage people to check out that video. That was, like I said, I watched that and it just moved me. And like I said, by the end of it, I was like, I need to talk to that woman. And unfortunately, here
I am just down like 10 minutes down the road.
That I get to do this and have these conversations is just a blessing to me because I get to know.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
So.
I know a new runner. We should run some. Oh, wait, no, we don't like to run with other people.
We do not. I'll run with you. If you don't want to socialize with me or tell me I can go faster, then we're good.
Yeah. No, I totally understand. And I really appreciate you giving me this voice and this opportunity.
No, well, keep doing it. I'm absolutely, I think I've got a heart for kids as well, and I just love that some kids are getting chances that they wouldn't otherwise get, and that you are bringing some light to their life. So I think that's powerful. And again, in the movie, the kids, they tell a story that's just bigger than any run or anything. Their gratitude.
And that part, I knew the movie was going to be beautiful. I knew it was going to be really, really well done because they were so skilled and so good at telling stories, because I'd seen some of their earlier GoFundMe films that you can also see on the site. But I was just so taken aback by how much it's about more than running. And even a student said to me, Miss Fletcher, that movie, I mean, it's kind of about running, but it's not really about running. What he meant was it's about so much more than running. It's about life in a much bigger way. And that, I don't think I could imagine how that would come out until I actually saw it. And I was so pleased that they were able to do that they, that's their craft, and they were able to make it happen.
No, well, again, this whole podcast is based on a biblical scripture, but it got me to looking at, in the Bible, it's like there's so many references to running and athletics, and that's because even way back then, a lot of these great speakers and preachers understood people could relate to kind of what it takes to be a runner and an athlete. And I think it's true thousands of years later today. I think people kind of get that, and I love the parallel.
And that it's a metaphor.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, keep fighting the good fight then. Keep running, and I appreciate you being a part of it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Well, thank you for listening in to that interview. I hope you found it every bit as powerful and moving as I did. I have included links to the GoFundMe campaign if you would love to support Kate in her effort, and especially these young students. I've also included a link to the video. Go watch this video, hear these testimonies of some of these students who've received these scholarships and then came back to be part of the video. And as you heard from Kate, they came out and supported her run in the middle of the night. She is, like I said, she's just incredible. Her story moved me. Sitting there talking with her live, having this conversation was a absolute treat. I'm sure I was supposed to meet her. I'm sure our paths were supposed to cross. And so that makes it all the more powerful. So anyhow, go to Podbean where I published this, and there'll be some links wherever you got this story. There will be links where you can go check out your opportunity to support her financially and support those students, more importantly. They absolutely deserve the opportunity that she is trying to raise the money to give them. So anyhow, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was a moving interview for you. I hope you'll come back next time when we'll have another, I'm sure, very powerful story. Until then, I hope you have a great week. If you're running, get out there and run hard. If you're not, get out there and cheer somebody like Kate on. Maybe take a bucket of "you can do it" notes to somebody who's running 100 miles in the middle of the night. And if you're not a runner, hey, I'm just glad you got to hear this story of Kate Fletcher, because I think you'll agree it was much, much, much more than a running story. This is just a good person looking out for other people's story who just happens to be a runner. And in my experience is there are a lot of people like that in the running community, and it makes me really happy to be a part of it. So until next time, you have a great week.